What's going on, Go Nation? I'm back with another video. Today I'm gonna be reacting to the new Rockstars. Haven't reacted to them. It's been a while since I've reacted to them. But today I'm gonna be watching Secret Invasion Episode 1 breakdown, Easter eggs, and details you missed. Cause you be missing a lot of details, Easter eggs. Not me, I never miss them. Yeah, but honestly, I was gonna get straight. This is gonna be a pretty long video. But I'm gonna get straight into it. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We're on the road to 100 subs or so close. We gotta hit it, okay? Let's get into the video.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Secret Invasion Episode 1. No one is safe, and in this world of lies and deceit and creepy girls with bouncy balls, survival depends.
She was kind of creepy, can't lie.
These things closely for subtle nuances, missable details, hidden agendas, and good old-fashioned Marvel Easter eggs. So let's dive back into the Skrull Search and break down this episode frame by frame for everything you might have missed. And quick announcement, New Rockstars is now 3 channels. This channel for the Easter egg breakdowns like you're watching right now, and the Break Room, which is our new home of our Inside Marvel Secret Invasion after shows, and also the deep dive for the special film analyses from me. Subscribe to all 3 and support us with this Skrull inspired shirt at nerdriot.shop. Okay, the opening Marvel Studios title card does not use the flashy swoop through the letters with the iconic MCU moments that we typically see. There's no time for that. This isn't about the Avengers and their boom booms. It's about the stark realities of living in a world where no hero can be trusted. Moscow, present day. The same title card location typeface as we saw in Captain America Civil War and in Black Widow. Stylistically and tonally, the producers of the series are going for spycraft and globe-trotting political drama. And by present day, Marvel Studios executive Jonathan Schwartz confirmed that the show takes place after She-Hulk, so in the MCU timeline, we're looking at like late 2025 or maybe early 2026, but Marvel has proven time and time again that they cannot agree on exact dates for these titles. Agent Everett Ross, or who we think is him, takes a call after being introduced as a CIA.
I knew something was off with him in the beginning.
He returned in Black Panther, and then again in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, where we learned his ex-wife is CIA Director Val. He committed espionage for the Wakandans and got arrested, but Okoye broke him free. But since this is a Skrull imposter version of Ross, presumably the real Ross could be hiding in Wakanda, or Ross might have been taken and he's in a Skrull fracking pod somewhere. I don't think the implication is that the whole character of Ross every time we've seen him has been a Skrull, but rather this imposter has filled in sometime recently while Ross has been MIA. This kind of brick tunnel is a classic spy setting, perhaps inspired by the 1949 Orson Welles film The Third Man. Series director Ali Salim confirmed to us in an interview that films like this were part of his inspiration.
Go back even further, like The Third Man, the classics, right?
Sure.
And because the show is, the Secret Invasion is about trust and suspicion and identity, I always go back to the Conversation, Coppola's Conversation. There is a sense that Nick Fury, which you'll see in later episodes, sort of evolves into a lone classic American Western gunslinger.
Yes.
Which is, again, a little different than we've ever seen him before. And so we started to look at classic American Westerns like The Searchers and even Unforgiven.
Ross tosses his phone, he doesn't want to be tracked, and he pulls a firearm from his ankle, the gun he'll use to plug poor Prescott. We hear Prescott's voice here.
Imagine a world where information can't be trusted. Not very hard, is it?
This is actor Richard Dormer, aka Beric Dondarrion, the late Lord of Game of
good.
Thrones, which is really
I liked
perfect
him.
with his croaky true believer rant. This speech outlines the whole "Who do you trust" theme that ran throughout Brian Michael Bendis' 2009 Marvel crossover event that this series is based on. But specifically, Prescott is talking to who he thinks is Ross, and how lately a guy like Ross cannot trust even someone like his ex-wife, Val, the CIA director. I think Prescott is hinting that Val could be a Skrull, without realizing that the guy he's talking to actually is. But while we're playing this game of Skrull Search, I think the CIA director, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, is a very good option of someone who could be a Skrull. Prescott references the hazy distinction between real news outlets and fringe conspiracy websites, something that we saw explored in Spider-Man No Way Home with J. Jonah Jameson's Daily Bugle outlet, which by the end of that film was live streaming in Times Square. As Ross walks up to the building, you can see the windows on the second floor are papered over with newspaper to hide from surveillance and to pin on one's favorite conspiracy collage. Prescott's computer inside shows UKN 24 News. I don't believe that's a real news service, but it might be something like the BBC or or news from the Kremlin, since this is Russia, and Russia doesn't normally allow residents to access Western internet. So Prescott would need to have his own uplink if that's the case. There's a classic Pepe Sylvia research wall, and because this is what I do best, I'm going to break down everything on this.
Oh my God.
It's about a Colombian ex-rebel politician surging with young voters. The headline above says that he's a nationalist, and this is already telling us something's up. Because in Latin America and in most places in the world, young voters don't typically support far-right nationalists, but in Latin America, left-wingers and socialists are typically more popular with the youngins. So this tells us that both sides of this political shift are really being orchestrated by Skrulls, and there's a lot more than a handful of Skrulls on Earth. Then a redacted document beneath showing that same bearded man who was just on the computer screen, and he can make out the word Treadstone, which is the name of a Black Ops project in the Bourne Identity films. Yellow post-it notes reading Bogota Terror, connected to Heist, who is a target, and beside that to the left, Argentine group claims to be responsible. Prescott later explains that it was an Argentinian terrorist group who attacked Bogota, resulting in a political shift in that country, followed by an attack in the Philippines, and then a mass shooting in Munich, and we see on the board an explosion in London. So rather than independent groups, he says that they are all connected, one group of Skrulls seeking to destabilize the political regimes on Earth.
Chaos. And that's only the beginning.
In a word,
Chaos.
There's also a headline about an embassy attack and, quote, theft of confidential items. This plus that Heist mention might mean the Skrulls are taking tissue and other materials in their plot to create Super Skrull warriors, which in the comics are Skrulls that can also mimic the powers in addition to the appearance of the enhanced individuals that they morphed into. And in the trailer, we saw a container with Cull Obsidian on the label. This could have been one of those stolen items. Prescott also has a Russian translation book on the table showing that he has followed this city by city and has to learn the new language everywhere he goes. And I think before he dies, this proves he's not a Skrull. If he took their minds and memories, he would know how to speak their languages already. Ross says,
the atmosphere has been tense.
yeah, because he's a Skrull and adapting to a new global atmosphere. We're on to you. Prescott says,
Started 30 years ago when the Skrulls found Earth. Carol Danvers and Nick Fury promised to find them a new planet.
yeah, he's recapping the events of the 2019 Captain Marvel film, which ended with Carol Danvers leaving Earth with Skrull refugees in the year 1995. Since then, we know Fury has been working with Skrulls on Earth, with Talos and his wife Soren filling in for Fury and Maria Hill in Spider-Man Far From Home. Prescott asks,
Then where is Fury?
He's on Saber.
Saber is a space station that we see in the trailer for the Marvels, and it might be the same space station that Fury was on with several Skrulls in the post-credit scene for Far From Home. Saber is based on the Peak. That's the space station of Sword in the comics. Sword in the MCU has been seen in WandaVision, and under the leadership of Tyler Hayward was focused more on terrestrial anomalies, but with Monica Rambeau involved now, it might have shifted back to his astronaut projects, which seems to be the case in the Marvels trailer. Prescott hands Ross a holodeck. Immediately, we see a Skrull face beam up, and notice that Martin Freeman looks outward over the display, since this Skrull already knows what he's about to see. Prescott sees through Ross's bullshit, and he tackles and chokes him, but Ross shoots him through the chest. And he calls Maria Hill for an extraction, and for Ross to show up in her car's computer display as the actual Agent Ross tells us that she either knew that he would be there, and the Skrulls had infiltrated this unit without her knowing, and that poor Maria Hill was doomed by the end of this episode, or just that Skrulls can bypass whatever voice ID and unique phone that Ross would have set up with Hill ahead of time. Ross flees his tail through this blue-lit rave, with the dancers doing that same fist pump that, Zemo did when he became that meme in the Falcon the Winter Soldier. Then on the rooftop is some splashy purple lighting, mixing it with the green tones of the night sky to give off the green and purple color palette that we see in the main titles. Skrull skin is of course green, and their bruises and blood show up as the color purple. This in roster doesn't make the jump, and we learn that his pursuer was Talos in disguise. Ross dies a Skrull, bleeding out on the street, just as Maria Hill's shadow nearly touches him, foreshadowing her own death this way at the end of the episode. Tommy actually asked the director if Ross was meant to be seen as a Skrull the entire time we've known him or not.
I think all will be revealed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All will be revealed is how my uncle signs off all of his emails, which
Oh,
is
really?
a little ominous.
Yeah.
I'm like, what does this mean? What are you
Yeah.
going to reveal to us?
I might steal it.
So presumably the series will answer that question. I think if you pay to get Martin Freeman in your series, he doesn't just show up in one episode. Like Julie Louis-Dreyfus and Don Cheadle both showed up twice in 2 different episodes, each on Falcon Winter Soldier. Vincent D'Onofrio originally shot scenes for 2 episodes in Hawkeye, though they cut the earlier one with young Echo in the Karate Dojo. So I will think we'll see some form of Everett Ross again. Now, it was confirmed that the opening titles were generated by AI, a company called Method Studios, according to the director. I would have preferred if a human artist or animator were paid to do this this work? Especially since Marvel held this all the way to June? You could say Marvel might have done this on purpose to start us off with false, non-human imagery. I don't know. I think they just wanted to save a buck. This show ain't about technology, it's about xenophobia. But hey, I'm just gonna point out a few of these details that they fed this AI script to synthesize and to welcome our new computer overlords. We see the destruction.
I thought it looked cool.
Skrullos. A serene field explodes in volcanic eruption, followed by the doomed planet as spaceships depart on the right. This is what made the Skrull people so diasporatic. Then a single figure, maybe the first Skrull on Earth with the Skrull craft floating overhead, reminds us visually of Peter Quill when he got abducted by the Ravagers in 1988. The city of New York as Skrull ships float overhead out of sight with a green wave spreading through the buildings. Then Nick Fury, still wearing his eye patch here, standing inside of a Skrull ship, it looks like. Then people walking in front of the Kremlin, I think. It does look like the architecture of Moscow's Red Square as their faces turn to Skrull green. Then members of law enforcement shifting into Skrulls. Then a fire raging through Moscow, foreshadowing the bomb at the end of this episode. Then the clock of Elizabeth Tower, aka Big Ben, glowing green as the hand spins rapidly. Then we get our first look at the Skrull Council, humans in positions of authority, as a Skrull in a suit shifts back into a human form. Presumably many world leaders are actually Skrulls. Then, interesting shot, we see the green cloud hovering over the White House, but unlike the other famous governmental landmarks, which become the color green, the White House remains white, still unaffected by the Skrull influence. I think President Ritson might be one world leader who is still, as of now, uncorrupted, but that also makes him more vulnerable in a way. And then a chessboard, foretelling Nick and Maria's chess game later on this episode, and here, a bishop shifts into a queen and then into a king. The idea being that faith leaders, queens and kings, all cannot be trusted right now. Fury thinks he's playing Cold War era chess, but really he's playing chess where all of his opponent's pawns have somehow made it to the other side of the board and have now leveled up into pieces that can move however the hell they want. And we're gonna see how Gravik jumps the rank from a bishop, like a lieutenant, all the way to the top as a king. But don't forget, the queen, who we could see as Gaia, is technically the most powerful piece on a chessboard. A beam of blinding light pierces the forest, and the silhouette of Nick Fury steps off the ship. The blinding light reminds us a lot of Steven Spielberg's lighting in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Fury immediately doubles over, wincing in pain from his knee. He's not as spry as he used to be, and adjusting to Earth's gravity as opposed to the space station isn't as easy on this old timer. Fury wears a knit cap and a coat, pretty much the same clothes that Skrull Ross did. I know it's just cold, but this show just doesn't really want us to trust anybody. Most importantly, Fury is not wearing his signature eye patch. In an interview with Vanity Fair, Samuel L. Jackson said the patch is part of who strong Nick Fury was, but now his new look is part of his vulnerability now. You can look at it and see he's not this perfectly indestructible person. In Maria Hill's safe house, there's a poster for island art at the Brixton Community Center. Brixton is part of London, so the safe house might have been set up by Falsworth in the MI6. On the rooftop, Talos cultivates a Santo Milica, a Skrull sky plant, he says, planted by Soren, who carry these seeds around. Talos says that it's adapted to this planet, a metaphor for how the Skrulls have adapted to Earth and prefer it as their home, as opposed to some new home world that might not even be out there. Now, the word Santo is Spanish for saint or holy or sacred, and Milica is a Hindu name meaning desiring union or wishes unity. So together we get two cultures coming together to electric company together, sacred unity, which is what Talos and Soren wanted between humans and Skrulls. Fury and Talos press their heads together, a Skrull gesture of endearment that we saw Talos and Soren do in Captain Marvel, and Talos says,
But after the blip, you were different.
We only briefly saw Fury post-blip at Tony Stark's funeral in Avengers Endgame, perhaps being so freaked out by Thanos' attack has turned Fury's attention to cosmic threats, and that's why he's on Saber. We learned Talos was kicked off the Skrull Council, and Gravik now leads it, and he set up his base in one of Russia's abandoned nuclear plants, many of which are off the books. We learn that Skrulls can withstand radiation, probably because their shapeshifting occurs on a molecular level, as we learn in Captain Marvel, which would allow their cells to resist neutrons firing through them. We learn that the Skrulls are using an American taken from an AAR group, Americans Against Russia, to detonate a bomb for materials taken from Kazakhstan to start a war between Russia and the United States, a plot that we saw in Tom Clancy's espionage thriller, The Sum of All Fears. James Rhodes returns, last seen in The Falcon the Winter Soldier, now briefing US President Ritson, played by Dermot Mulroney, a perfect pick for a show about face blindness, considering the running bit of everyone confusing him with Dylan McDermott.
This is a picture of my face. Who am I? Dylan McDermott or Dermot Mulroney?
In Captain America Brave New World, Harrison Ford has been announced to play US President Thaddeus Ross, so something's gonna go down with President Ritson. On their West Wing style walk and talk, they pass portraits of US Presidents Harry Truman, Ulysses S. Grant, George Washington, I think that's Dwight Eisenhower by the flowers, James Buchanan, Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. They aren't in any particular order, and we do skip Gerald Ford in the actual order of succession there, but the idea is, how far back would an alien infiltration have gone? How many of these guys were actually human? The Secret Invasion comics don't shy away from politics. Both Barack Obama and John McCain were depicted as Skrulls on TV screens. And it's interesting we don't see any presidents past Reagan, because as with The West Wing, the modern era of the MCU takes place in a separate historical timeline with different presidents. Like through 2016 in the MCU continuity, the president was Matthew Ellis, who is last seen in Iron Man 3. Fury's nighttime stroll takes him past a food truck with the Cyrillic letters for shawarma, fitting that this founder of the Avengers would grab a bite of their favorite food. Fury passes a kissing couple, and the woman looks at him. This is one of the people that Gravik turns into later. So all these people who look at Fury on this walk, therefore, are Skrulls watching his every move. This idea of kissing to stay hidden in plain sight was actually a move by Steve Rogers and Natasha Romanoff in Winter Soldier.
Kiss me. What? Public displays of affection make people very uncomfortable.
Yes, they do.
Yet this Skrull doesn't care if Fury looks at her, because Gravik knows that his plot is too far along to stop. A ball bounces out in the street and a girl stares at Fury, the same girl and ball emulated by Gravik later. This raises some red flags, and it's the same rightful alien suspicion that Will Smith has in Men in Black.
May I ask why you felt little Tiffany deserved to die?
I'm thinking, you know, 8-year-old white girl, middle of the ghetto, bunch of monsters, this time of night with quantum physics books. She about to start some shit, Zed. She's about 8 years old. Those books are way too advanced for her.
Olivia Colman plays Sonya Falsworth of the MI6. Her name Falsworth could make her related to James Montgomery Falsworth, the British member of the Howling Commandos in the first Captain America film. The MCU did something similar with Jim Morita's grandson being the principal in Spider-Man Homecoming. Falsworth jokes that Fury could have been the ghost of Paul Robeson, referring to the actor and singer best known for his rendition of Old Man River from Showboat. Robeson was politically active. He embraced socialism. He visited Moscow. So I don't think Falsworth is just talking about their blackness, but rather a black man in Moscow specifically. Falsworth's office is lined with clocks, all set to a different hour, but at the same minute, her way of knowing what time it is in each country. And Falsworth explains,
"It's an old English spy master that started the tradition. A clock goes up when your time in the circus is done."
Circus, huh? Well, John Lee Carey nicknamed the MI6 the Circus because the headquarters were located at Cambridge Circus. So essentially, the spy master would put a clock up whenever a spy retired or perhaps died or was killed in action. Falsworth says,
"I still haven't forgiven you for destroying my very expensive flat."
You mean city?
Yes, they're referring to the events of Spider-Man Far From Home when Nick Fury was involved with Mysterio's use of Stark drones that did quite a bit of damage to London. Falsworth says that Fury's not knowing about the Kazakhstan theft and letting her thugs take him are signs that he's just too old for this fight, when in reality, he went out for a walk knowing that he'd probably get taken, and probably so that he could bug Falsworth's room. He even tells her that he let them take him so that he could get to her. I think he's more up for this than she thinks. In fact, that limp he walks around with may be performative so that people will underestimate him. Outside the Skrull base, New Skrullos, a newcomer named Beto walks up and delivers a passphrase.
Home in my own skin.
It's not just home that they're looking for a home where they can walk around without having to be in disguise. I like how his sweatshirt looks like a chessboard, chess being a common motif in this episode. The guard booth sign says Zelezhnograd, which is a town in Russia with a developed nuclear industry, but it's not 312 kilometers south of Moscow. Gaia gives Beto a blue Skrull fruit, just another example of Skrull plant life growing successfully on Earth. They are gradually terraforming it. Gaia enters a room with the humans whose bodies they've taken so far. The second one she passes is that art dealer that we see later in the episode, Vasily Pobrishkin. And already bringing up a question I had after watching this episode, why does Gaia need to pay the Skrull posing as that art dealer for the bomb materials? I'm thinking maybe the money helps him balance his books and pay the people he smuggled the bomb parts from. The Skrulls bring in the kidnapped AAR member saying take his face, and then they strap him in saying take his mind. These shells that they keep the humans in zap their temples to keep them dormant and to bring their memories to the forefront. Talos and the other Skrulls use similar memory technology on Carol Danvers at the beginning of Captain Marvel. But this idea of Skrulls assuming the humans' minds is a really interesting concept because it forces their Skrull identities to the back of their minds and forces them to carry two souls at any given time. This idea was explored in the FX series The Americans, where in later seasons, a Soviet spy played by Matthew Reeves began to sincerely adopt American culture and values, and that really just messed with his head. Fury tells Talos a bit later,
You know, I know a bunch of good-looking Skrulls. You ain't one of them.
Okay, all right, guys.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn what other relationships with Skrulls Fury might have. Did this guy hook up with some Skrulls? I mean, he got to know Talos and Soren and all their friends. Just saying. Back at New Skrullos, Gaia reads a book called Understand the Human Mind, a Skrull trying to use human psychology against us. This is why we should never publish books about psychology. I'm just kidding. Gravik loads cube after cube of sugar in his drink. A villain having a bit of a sweet tooth is a recurring trope. We saw this with Hans Zalanda in Inglourious Bastards and Father Flynn in Doubt. We don't see Gravik sipping the tea. Maybe the guy's just wasting sugar because he hates processed human food. Gravik's second in command is a Skrull named Pagon, who from the comics was the Skrull that had impersonated Elektra and the lover to the Skrull queen, Varenki. He sends Gaia off with a driver named Zerkzu, which is the name of a Skrull from the 70s Marvel Premiere comics who briefly assumed the identity of Richard Nixon. So back to that portrait of Richard Nixon, it might have been a Skrull. Because no American in the modern age would willfully resign. Humans ain't that honorable, it turns out. Gaia sees an inflatable Russian nesting doll, another example of this idea of people having other identities inside their shell. Fury reminds Talos that Talos is 136 years old, and Talos says that equates to less than 40 in human years, meaning that Skrulls live somewhere around 280 Earth years. This poses a huge problem for Earth. If the Skrulls are populating the planet rapidly, living such long lifespans and consuming natural resources at roughly the rate as humans would consume them, but with lives over 4 times longer than humans live, Earth's ecosystem would collapse unless the Skrulls put in place population controls. Talos asks Fury what he got for his midlife crisis shopping spree.
What you get for yours? The Avengers.
Yeah, Fury considers the Avengers his impulse buy, responding to an existential panic that he was feeling. It's also interesting that he considers 2012 to be Fury's midlife. He's pretty old by the time of that movie. That was only 13 years ago, suggesting that he's got a lot more life he intends to live. Paprishkin says that the chair Fury sits in belonged to Louis XV, who is the great-grandson of Louis XIV, the great French absolute monarch, and Louis XV was the grandfather to Louis XVI, who was executed during the French Revolution. But Fury later mixes it up and calls it the Louis XIV chair. Fury interestingly says that everyone gets one lie, but not two, making us wonder what Fury's one lie is, because otherwise, why would he tolerate a single lie from others? Does he have a family we haven't met yet? Does he like to fart on planes? Fury shoots the Skrull Paprishkin, waiting until that Skrull growls at Talos, "You betrayed your own people," because Fury knows that when someone says that, when someone feels that way, there's no coming back from that. This Skrull is motivated to kill. Talos, though, feels horrible that he played a role in one of his own kind getting killed. Gaia kicks Hill's ass, and Talos has a chance to check in with his daughter. He reveals Soren's death to her.
How?
Why did you ask? The people that you work for.
Yes, Gravik was responsible in some way for Soren's death. Perhaps Soren was in human form during one of the terrorist attacks that we saw on the newspaper board. Maybe she was trying to protect the materials that were being stolen. Or maybe Soren was trying to get Gaia back, and Gravik killed her for getting too close. At this bar, Fury speaks some Russian with this guy at the bar.
Смотри, сколько хочешь. Все равно не будешь таким, как раньше.
Повторите, пожалуйста, товарищ.
Interesting that he can speak Russian. As a figure during the Cold War, Fury was stationed in a number of places where he'd have to use this language.
Belfast, Bucharest, Belgrade, Budapest. I like the bees, I can make them rhyme.
But this old man is another form Gravik takes at the end of the episode. So this is really a direct message from Gravik to Fury to make him doubt himself. It's just really creepy to learn how close Gravik was to Fury throughout the episode, but never chooses to strike. It's in this moment where across the bar, Gravik is carefully watching Fury and Hill play chess, and that's probably when he decides to kill Hill and not Fury. Fury says this is how he kept the Cold War from going hot.
Spooks like me, bad shots.
You can't say that.
No, you can't say that.
Yes, that word is considered both a derogatory term for black people and an archaic term for spy. Fury probably means both ways. A chessboard separates them, and Hill takes white. Of course she does. And she does a standard E4 opening. That's where white moves the king's pawn 2 squares up. It's the most popular chess opening as it immediately stakes the claim on the center and frees 2 pieces, the queen and the king's bishop, for action. What do we see in the opening of this episode? A bishop, a queen, and a king. Fury asks if Hill is covering her bases, which refers both to their conversation and her style of play. Fury remembers the moment from the blip from the post-credit scene of Avengers Infinity War, including his near F-bomb.
Well done.
The director, Ali Salim, expanded on this in his interview with us.
The blip was a very disorienting thing for him. So I think he really is on his back foot. But the whole show is about, can he regain it or not?
After asking Pagon to delay the strike, we think Gaia is getting cold feet, but it's just to give us false hope ahead of her meeting with her father. She tips off Talos that there will be 3 couriers, and only now, upon looking back on it, do we realize they just came up with 3 empty shells of the shell game, 2 couriers, and Gaia herself, to occupy the exact number of people in the other's group, Fury, Hill, and Talos. All of this was a big setup. They lose these couriers in the Russian Unity Day celebration. We see some acrobats and some clowns, making this exactly the kind of circus that Falsworth was referring to earlier. But Fury sees that girl with the same rainbow ball from his night walk the night before. He follows her as she shapeshifts into the old man at the bar that he bought a shot, and then into the woman from the kissing couple who stared at him, and then finally Gravik himself. And the fact that Gravik is shapeshifting in plain sight of everyone else in this Russian Unity Day hangout shows us how little he cares about being spotted as a Skrull, because he knows that bigger fireworks are gonna happen right in this second anyway. He detonates the bombs, and notice how Hill would have survived, but what was she doing? Helping someone get to their feet. That's what slowed her down, so that fake Fury could catch up to her. Hill's final words to Nick Fury are, While it wasn't Fury directly who pulled the trigger, blood remains on his hands, and it hurts him so much to think that in her dying moments, she thinks that she was betrayed. But also we could read this as Maria Hill warning her old mentor that there is a second Nick Fury in the field. He took his eye off the ball, and he refused to make a chess move. He allowed himself to fall 3 steps behind and get played. So, God, R.I.P. Maria Hill. Kobe Smulders, you've been great to us these past 11 years of the MCU. We'll really miss you. And I think part of the reason this episode established that Soren was dead was to remove any doubt. Hill's known Skrull impersonator is gone too, so there's really no chance that this isn't her here. If this series can kill off Maria Hill, someone who's been with us since 2012, it can permanently change the status of any MCU figure. And little detail in this final shot of Maria Hill bleeding out, beside her is a dropped Russian flag, colors white, blue, and red, just like the colors of Maria Hill. A white top, a blue coat and jeans, and red blood staining it all.
Bro, shout out to Eric Voss with the new Rockstars. Another great video. I cannot wait for episode 2, man. Look, if episode 2 is gonna be better than episode 1, it might have to be top 3 MCU show so far. I don't say movie, but show. Hopefully nobody dies that I like in this next episode. Alright? Don't do that to me, Kevin. Okay? I'm scared. I'm frightened. If you want to go kill something, go kill AI. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We on the road to 100 subs. Go Nation. I'm out.